sensations, perceptions, formations, and consciousness are also like this. Shariputra, all dharmas are marked by emptiness. They neither arise nor cease, are neither defiled nor pure, neither increase nor decrease. Therefore, given emptiness, there are no forms, sensations, perceptions, formations, or consciousness. No eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind. No sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, or objects of mind. No realm of sight, and so forth, down to no realm of mind consciousness. There is neither ignorance nor extinction of ignorance, and so forth, down to neither old age and death nor extinction of old age and death. No suffering, no cause, no cessation, no path, no knowledge, and no attainment. With nothing to attain, a bodhisattva relies on prajnaparamita, and thus the mind is without hindrance. Without hindrance, there is no fear. Far beyond all inverted views, one realizes nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future rely on prajnaparamita, and thereby attain unsurpassed, complete, perfect enlightenment. Therefore, know the prajnaparamita as the great miraculous mantra, the great bright mantra, the supreme mantra, the incomparable mantra, which removes all suffering and is true, not false. Therefore, we proclaim the prajnaparamita mantra, the mantra that says Gate, Gate, Mara, Gate, Mara, Samgate, Bodhisattva.
Having chanted the part of Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra, we reverently offer the Mary to great benefactor and founder of the doctrine, the original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. To the countless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that permeate the myriad worlds, to the eternal three jewels in the 10 directions, and unto all teachers of the true Dharma who transmitted the flame, that we may repay their compassionate blessings. We further offer this Mary to all the Dharma protecting devas, to the Dharma protecting saints, to the spirit of this place, to the temple protecting spirits. What we pray for is flourishing of the true Dharma, peace in the land, harmony of all nations, tranquility within the Sangha, wisdom and prosperity for countless supporters, continual turning of the two wheels. May we with all beings realize the Buddha way.
Bodhisattva.
Recitation of the great compassionate Radharani to all beings in the 3 worlds and 6 realms, and especially to Barbara Millsap, Nancy Campbell, Richard Destin, Deidre Lehner, Dee Lehner, Curry, Harold, Abby, June Lockhart, Mark Ernest, Bob Pickett, Susan Stenberg, James, Ethan, Mike Lenhart, Michael Lucky Smith, Parade Bond, Jenny Hennessy, Alice Wong, Hiroshi Wasami, Jim Kajild, Jerry Phillips, Lorna Meckland, Kim Socha, Raleigh Kishon, and to all those who have died in natural and human-made disasters, including acts of terrorism, violence, political persecution, and war. May they be serene through the transition we call death. We also dedicate this Mary to Andrew Frankel, Guard Wells, MJC, Becca, Daniel, Rosemary B, Mary B, Rosa family, Margarita, O'Brien, Amelia, mothers. May the heart of compassion illuminate their lives. We pray that all beings may prosper and all misfortunes cease. Zazen. Dharma gives the access to the Jesus form. Sutra opening verses.
Take a few moments and introduce yourself to your neighbor. See if you can learn their name if you don't know it.
What's your name?
I'm Emma. Oh, you. Emma.
I know you. I know all about you.
thinking that I need to make up a phrase. I grew up in a Catholic church, and we had a very simple phrase. Peace be with you. And then at one point the priest, that was my favorite part of Mass always, the priest would say, I forget exactly what they say, and then you turn and you say, peace be with you, and you shake everyone's hand around you. That was the only time I was allowed to look behind myself in Mass. My mom was very strict about that. Of course you want to see the choir, there's some singing going on, do you want to look around or whatever? We had to just look straight ahead. So I think that's also why I kind of like that. A couple Catholic things coming up today. So I'm going to continue talking about the Diamond Sutra, which is one of the core texts of Mahayana Buddhism, and I don't know, it's one of my favorites, so for whatever that's worth. So we've been talking about these first few chapters, and there's many commentators or commentaries which will say that the Diamond Sutra is really the first 5 chapters. Sometimes they'll say it's just the first chapter, and then some will say it's the first 5 chapters, and then everything else. And then, of course, the whole thing is also the sutra. But oftentimes at Buddhai Temple, we're focusing on those first 5 sections. Each one is fairly short. But the reason the commentators say that is because there's kind of a full teaching, the kind of a full circle that comes around in those first 5 sections, and then kind of elaboration on that theme for the rest of the sutra. Again, some commentators will say really all you need to get from the Diamond Sutra is the first section, which is a description of the Buddha's ordinary life, and everything else is an elaboration on that. So the first section, like I just said, is a very simple, beautiful presentation of what the life of a Buddha looks like, to just be simply living, receiving nourishment, and offering their life to the people who have assembled to hear the teaching. And the people who are living together with the Buddha. In this case, it would be the renunciate community, would be the most obvious, but it's not only about the renunciate community. All the beings that gather together to hear the teachings, even if they're not sleeping in the forest with the Buddha, they're all part of the being, of the assembly of beings who have come together to live together with the Buddha, to try to live out this life of awakening. So it's the first section. The second section, then Subhuti, who's one of the Buddha's closest disciples, comes forward and asks a question. And he asks a question about where should we abide? Where should we invest? Where should we really be living? Not just in an outward sense, but where's our heart to be placed? And how do we control this unruly beast of a being that I am? He says, how do I subdue, or how should we subdue the mind, or how should we subdue the heart? The Buddha first gives a teaching about subduing, and it's a surprising teaching because he doesn't just give Subhuti a technique. He tells Subhuti that he should regard this wholeness of existence in a particular way. He says that we should think of all possible types of beings, and we should dedicate ourselves to their awakening, to all of them. So that's not just about getting something done, like saving all of these beings, but you can also see how that aligns the heart. It's very different than the Buddha giving Subhuti some kind of a spiritual hammer with which to inflict power upon his heart to control it. It's the opposite of that. He says, actually, if you align your heart with this intention, if you enshrine that intention in the center of your being, this idea of the unruly heart is not going to be this kind of problem that it is for you now. And then in the next section, he teaches him a wondrous practice of non-abiding. Wondrous in Buddhism is a great word. It does mean all the things like Wonderland, Alice in Wonderland kind of has that connotation, but it also just means ungraspable. It means something that's beyond what we could know what it is. So if we think about here a wondrous practice, he doesn't just give him some technique. He says, here's a practice, a wondrous practice, an ungraspable practice of generosity. and that that practice is to do the generosity, to practice the generosity, but to do it far beyond the kind of grasping that you would normally do. Thinking about who's giving the gift, who's getting the gift, what is the gift, and all of the good things that might come from the practice that I've been doing. He says to let go of all of that. Don't abide there. Don't abide in all the things that you can measure and identify. He says the wondrous practice is, it's not a location you're trying to get to. It's a way of being. So you think, like, where should I be? And what I'm going to tell you is, what should you do? Right? And you should do that no matter where you are. That's the kind of teaching that he's giving there. Right? So in those two chapters, he's responding to Subhuti's question. And then in the 5th section, the Buddha now asks Subhuti a question. He says, Subhuti, what about this body of the Buddha? He says, what about the body of the Tathagata? Tathagata is another name for the Buddha, which I'll talk about a little bit in a moment. He says, Subhuti, what do you think? Can the Tathagata be seen by bodily marks or not? And last week we went into quite a bit of the kind of technical Buddhist explanation about what marks are. So marks just being like the things you recognize that allow you to have an experience of something. So you can imagine the Buddha there with the assembly and Subhuti coming forward, and he says, Subhuti, can you see me? Can you see the awakened one? Like by virtue of this kind of like recognizable features that I have? And Subhuti says, no, world-honored one. Attaining the sight of the Tathagata is not possible by means of bodily marks. And why not? The Tathagata in places has explained that bodily marks are exactly not bodily marks. So this is very Zen kind of language. But one way that we could take it is just to say, well, of course, this thing which you can hold on to is not the total body of truth. But I am appearing here to be able to teach you something. So that is a kind of body of truth, but also it's not the totality of the body of truth, the thing that you could hold on to. That's kind of a way that we could understand it. So I want to talk a little bit more about this, this section. I've been thinking a lot about this seeing the Tathagata. I want to really encourage you to take that seriously. What does it mean to see truth? To see the body of truth. Here, as I mentioned, the word Tathagata usually is just thought of as another epithet for the Buddha. So there's lots of different names for the Buddha. And I suppose if you're writing a sutra, you don't want to always just say Buddha, Buddha, Buddha. It gets boring. So you're going to use some different things. So that's true. That's one way we can understand. It's just another word for Buddha. But it has a particular meaning. And so it may be that there's a reason that that word is showing up right here. Tathagata means something like the thus come one. Or it could also mean the thus gone one. In the Chinese writing of it emphasizes the coming and going, kind of two sides of the same coin. The one that appears thus. Here, thus means something like true. It means something like not as defined by the conditions of a subject-object relationship. Not like I'm the subject and the Buddha's the object. I'm seeing the Buddha and I can identify the Buddha by these particular marks. It's a deeper question than just like, could I identify it if I ran across this material thing? Could I identify it as the Buddha or not identify it as the Buddha? He's really asking here about seeing truth. The character, the Tathagata, that word tata in Chinese is written with a character called nyo, which also is oftentimes used to mean truth. In this case, truth meaning something that's beyond the subject-object split. Sometimes people will say something like non-dual. I'm not super fond of that word. So it's in Buddhism all over the place, but I think it got a certain kind of rap that I don't like so much. So that's all a little bit philosophical. But what I've really been thinking about lately more is on a very personal level. What's our yearning for that? What is it to see, not in this way in which I'm objectifying everything, but what would it be to see the pure body of truth in this very simple way, just thus? That's an important question for us to hold as people who are trying to learn the Buddha's teaching. The inseparable body of reality. What is that? It's not just a philosophical idea. In Buddhism, we say that that is a living truth. That's the living truth of our existence. Sometimes also referred to as the Dharma Dhatu, for those of you who study, or the Tathagata Garbha, the womb of the Buddha. And along with that, I've been developing this kind of attitude. Did you ever develop an attitude? I highly recommend developing an attitude about things, because if you're not, you're probably sort of, you're probably sort of too complacent, right? Not that attitude in itself is good. Oftentimes, attitude's kind of like, it's annoying and wrong in a lot of ways, but it's like it allows you to go into something. And the attitude I've been developing these days is about the gosh darn word practice. I was writing this past week. Jiko and I were spending a lot of time writing a grant proposal, and first time we've ever wrote a grant proposal. It's for a very interesting project. I hope we get it, but you have to do a lot of writing. So you have this idea, something that you want to do, and then you have to tell people about it. And so I was sitting there writing all this time, and I would just, every time I would come back to the word practice, I would just want to throw up. It's like, it's like a word that you can just fall into without even really thinking about it. I think especially if you've been around a Zen community or Buddhist community for a while. It's such a limiting conception of what we're doing. The idea that I'm going to be practicing, my practice, what is this practice? When we sit down for meditation, okay, I'm going to practice now. It's like, what about the truth? Like, in a way, it's like, who cares about you? What about the truth? Isn't that what you're coming to the practice for, right? Not the idea of a kind of obsession with the practice itself. And I think that happens for us very, very easily. It's one of the things that more theistic or just theistic religious traditions will kind of club you a bit for that, right? Because it's like, well, why are you concerned about you? Shouldn't you be concerned about God, right? And that has all of its own complications, which we won't get into in this moment. But I will read a little bit from the great sage Thomas Merton in a book called Contemplative Prayer. He gives this warning. He says, an emptiness that is deliberately cultivated for the sake of fulfilling a personal spiritual ambition is not empty at all. It is full of itself. It is so full that the light of God cannot get into it anywhere. There's not a crack or a corner left where anything else can wedge itself into this hard core of self-aspiration, which is our option to live centered in our own self. Such emptiness is in fact the emptiness of hell. And consequently, anyone who aspires to become a contemplative should think twice before he sets out on the road. Perhaps it's best to become a contemplative would be to desire with all one's heart to be anything but a contemplative. Who knows? Now, we're quite sure he had been reading a lot of Taoism and Buddhism by the time he was writing this. But he makes this really important point. It's so easy when we think about the word practice to become self-absorbed. And the cultivating for the sake of fulfilling a personal spiritual ambition, even if that's a relatively kind ambition, not like I'm going to be the number one, blah, 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 but basically motivated by that kind of movement, or even we could say self-improvement, has this problem in it, in which it doesn't leave room for needing anything else. The hardcore of self-aspiration. Not the hardcore, right? That's how I first read it. Hardcore self-aspiration. But the hardcore of self-aspiration just becomes fixed. That's what the Buddha's warning us about in the Diamond Sutra when he says that we should not be attached to a self, to a person, to a lifespan, to a being. The idea of those things, or the notion of those things. When we think about those, that hard core of self reifies, and then we're stuck. Nothing else can get in. Now in Buddhism, we don't typically talk about God getting in so much, but how just about everything? When you're sitting in meditation, that's not you doing it. It's like the whole universe doing it. And you can, that's sort of like woo-woo, but also just look around. All the sounds, smells, taste, touch, all of those things, if you live in this idea of if it's you doing it, you shut down. And here, Thomas Merton describes that as a kind of hell. It's a kind of emptiness, which is a reification of nothingness, kind of making nothingness a thing that becomes our spiritual aspiration. I've been thinking a lot about seeing the Buddha is also being seen by the Buddha. It's not just that we try to see the Buddha, but also we are seen by the Buddha. In the Lotus Sutra, another core sutra of the Mahayana tradition, which we study a lot at this temple, the very famous saying that only a Buddha alone, together with another Buddha, could contemplate the truth, or could know the truth. So it's a totally solitary Buddha with another Buddha. Right? That's also kind of Zen. Doesn't make sense too rationally, right? Totally solitary, but then with another. To truly see, to be seen, requires an emptying of self. Right? And that's what we're trying to do, not simply practice to get to some particular place. I had this wonderful experience yesterday. I walked over to Bi-Mart. I just live a couple doors up this way. I walked over to Bi-Mart to buy some batteries to heat up my bath. The batteries don't heat up my bath, but they do start the burner that heats up my bath. And they're D. Does anyone even use D batteries anymore? Big batteries. Then I forgot they were in there because they last a really long time. So anyway, I was walking over to Bi-Mart. It was such a beautiful day, and I had a nice walk over, and I've been having a little bit of back problems, so I was just walking really slow and just enjoying the beauty of the season. And got my batteries, and I was coming back, and I was just maybe a half block away from the temple here on 22nd Street, right in front of the house of a man who used to be an art teacher at the university. Do you remember him, Kogan? Mm-hmm. Who would come here and sketch when you were building this hall? And he was so interesting. He would come by every day and watch Kogan and other people were working on building things and say, looking good, looking good, looking good. And he was always really excited about what we were doing. And then he drew a picture. I don't know where, we have it stored somewhere. He gave to us of the trees out here in front. And I was walking in front of his house and I was thinking about him. I was remembering he's passed away quite a few years ago. And so I was in a certain mood, maybe pain in my back, knowing about this, this man who I didn't know well, just that kind of seeing and being seen by him, and the transience of life, knowing he passed away. And then I looked up, and there was someone, I could only see him from the back, who was walking here in front of the temple, and I think it was an older man. I didn't recognize him, and he stopped here in front of the gate. And so I stopped, and I was wondering, well, what's he going to do? And he turned towards the gate, and he took a couple steps off the sidewalk towards the gate, and he stopped, and he looked, and I was, about a half block away. He was just looking at it like this, and then he put his hand in Gasho, and he bowed, and then he stepped back onto the sidewalk, and he went along his way. Really touched me. In the way that things that really touch you, you're not sure why, but you have some feeling about it. I think part of it is a happiness, knowing that this temple is here, and that someone can do that, and that they do that. And normally I'm on the inside of the temple and I see it happening, but I don't have that kind of view from the outside, like what's happening. So I think that was part of why it touched me. But there was also something about the outward. He's there at the gate, and then the inward that's inside of the gate, but also the inward, of course, is inside of him, and now the temple is outward. He's at the gate of the temple. That outward and inward is not really possible to divide. And that's really what that's what this mudra of Gasho is about. That's the right hand and the left hand together. Oftentimes thought of the left hand of unity and the right hand of multiplicity are undividable. But we could also say the inner and the outer, that just was there in this way, which really touched me. And another aspect about it was I was in this mood, this attitude about practice. There's no practice there. And I was thinking about how difficult it can be to really accept who we are. And that this whole issue of seeing the Buddha is a question about that. You see, when we turn our attention towards a self-enclosed world, you'll never be able to accept yourself. But this world in which there's both seeing and being seen, not the enclosure of self-grasping, then that's a place where, again, I was watching him, feeling a little pain in my back. I'm like, and thinking about this old man, knowing that's where I'm headed. The whole thing is like, yeah, actually, I have something to do. But I can only do it if I can be seen. Not only what am I seeing. So this issue that the Buddha brings up with Subhuti about seeing the Buddha, and then Subhuti brings up this teaching about the marks and the not marks. Now the Buddha had been preaching in the previous section about not abiding in the marks. Don't abide in sight, sound, smells, taste, touch, or objects of mind, which mean thoughts, feelings, etc. He says, don't abide in them. He doesn't say block them out. Okay? Doesn't say that. He doesn't say negate them. Right? He just simply says, don't make that's where you make your home. Don't say, oh, I saw the Buddha looks like this, and that's where I'm going to make my home. Right? So when you do that, the being seen drops off. That there's some other way. That the marks and the not marks become important. So another thing I was thinking about this week in contemplating all of this is the mountain. A mountain's oftentimes an important kind of like glasses of water in Dharma talks get picked on a lot. Mountains are sort of this, their symbol anyway. I'll let you think about what they might be a symbol of, So I was thinking a lot about mountains, and I was thinking, one of the things about mountains, just like what even is a mountain? It's a little bit hard to say. And I was thinking about how in Japan, people are always calling things mountains, which here we would call hills. They have very tall mountains in Japan, but the word that they use, they don't usually use the word, they have a word hill as well, but people don't usually use that word very much. They just always say mountain, mountain, mountain. So like where my teacher's temple was at the foot of the northern mountain of Sendai. That mountain is like, you can walk to the top in like 4 minutes. Right? So it's not exactly what we will call a mountain. We will call it a hill. But so that's the first issue. If we just think like, what does it mean to see a mountain? So there's just a definitional issue. But let's put that aside. Let's all say that we have some kind of similar notion of what a mountain is. And if you see a mountain, immediately you're captivated by the marks, which is fine. It's appropriate. You're captivated. The reason that when you see the mountain, that your heart does something a little bit is because you're keying into its height, to its majesty, its grandeur, its stability, maybe its subtle color, or maybe the way that it's one of these few things that's so large that's up against the sky. There's lots of marks that you could pick out about what allows you to know a mountain. But when you see the mountain, that's what you see. The peak of the mountain becomes a lot of what identifying the mountain becomes about. Imagine it's the same thing with the Buddha. Say, what is it to see a Buddha? You'll see the peak. You'll see the extraordinary qualities of an awakened being. But how about all the things that make up the mountain that are not part of those marks? All the things that we don't really latch on to recognize a mountain that actually make the mountain be the mountain. Like, for example, the valley. Without the valley, there will be no mountain, right? Without the earth, there would be no mountain. The mountain depends on that, but the mountain is not one of the marks of a mountain. Maybe trees, maybe you see them, maybe you don't, but they're definitely there. And maybe that becomes a mark for you in some situations, but probably at least at a distance it doesn't. How about the earth itself? How about all of the rock and everything that's inside the mountain that you can't even see? How about the plates ramming together that are spread over, I don't know, these plates that are pushing up these mountains here? What are they, like maybe a quarter of the distance around the earth or something, it's like coming together in one place. You get my point, right? So there's all kinds of things which are not the marks of the mountain, which are also the mountain. But because we affix on one side of it, on just the marks, the seeing of the undividable body of reality disappears. And this is why in the reading of this fifth section, where the Buddha says, to see the body of the Buddha, or to see the body of the Tathagata, to see the body of the thus come one, you must see the marks and the not marks. If you just focus on the marks, you're making a mistake. Now, again, I mentioned last week that most commentaries or most translations will read this as to see the Tathagata, you should see the marks as no marks. And that's another avenue. But I just want to focus on this one right now. The marks and the no marks. Now, this is a very practical and spiritual principle of the kind of true seeing of thusness that is the living body of awakening. And why I want to say that it's very practical and spiritual is, of course, we should be inspired by things. And that inspiration will carry a mark. It's no problem. But remember, what the Buddha is saying is don't abide in the mark. Mm-hmm. Don't make that the home. That doesn't mean it's unimportant. It just means that if you make it all about that mark, then you're going to miss the point. So as you're seeing the mark, then think about all the things that go into whatever the thing you can see is, that are not the things that you can see, or smell, or taste, or touch, or even think about. That the all of that invisible is present there in the visible. And if we carried that back to the word practice, then I think we can redeem the word. So if you think about practice not as the lift myself up or pull myself up by my bootstraps type of endeavor, but you say, in the inspiration that I have to live in accordance with the Buddha's teachings, seeing others, including the Buddha, ancestors, my Sangha, and being inspired by that possibility, I want to try to live that way. If you simply practice affixing to the marks, then you end up in this kind of conundrum that Thomas Merton is illustrating for us here. That you're just trying to fabricate through that aspiration. That actually what the practice is asking you to do is slightly different. It's asking you to take the backward step. Many of you will know that phrase from Dogen Zenji. So not moving forward to try to force yourself into the marks, but saying, oh, whatever mountain is emerging here in front of me, which I can see the height and the majesty of this mountain, is certainly also arising right here. Because it takes everything for that mountain to arise. It takes everything for me to arise. It takes a mountain of my heart to be able to see a mountain that I think of as being external. And it takes that external mountain for the mountain of my own heart to be able to recognize that that's what it is that is seen. That whole process happening all the time. And actually, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here. And that's a different practice. Right? It's a different practice. So this whole body of business about seeing can get very philosophical and complicated quickly, which I love, because I'm that kind of person. That's part of a kind of person I am. But if you're not, it's totally fine. If you are, great, rock out on that. But if you're not, just think about it in this more simple way, and in many ways that will be more fulfilling anyway. Any questions or comments?
I'm going to try to ask this question. I think I have it, but I don't always have an answer, so I'm just trying to ask it.
Well, if you don't have an answer, then it's a real question. So
I know,
that's good. Yeah.
I was reading a book. I won't say what book because I wouldn't want to embarrass myself. But they were talking about the despisers of the body.
Yeah.
And they were saying something about maybe religious people, not Buddhist people, but religious people, and they despise the body. And he said, the despisers of the body create the things of God for themselves because they despise the body.
Yeah.
And he was saying we should not despise the body, that we should be like one, that we may like bring about like the world. And then I thought about like the very Buddhist enlightenment, about 1,000 things, and I was thinking about it because you were saying, about seeing the Buddha.
Yeah.
And so he says, we are like essentially just a body in a herd. He says there are like these herdsmen who are like trying to nip at the heels of the people to kind of steer them. That we are really all just like a herd. We are all just like one body.
Yeah.
So I was here, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about what you were saying, and thinking about how the things, you were talking about the Buddha, and how he said you should think of all these different types of spirits, and think to awaken them. And I was thinking, it's like, how do you think this is getting more into the philosophical
Yeah, yeah.
and complicated piece
Yeah.
of it. But like, I was thinking like, there's so many spirits we encounter that engage with our mental life, that become part of like our human escape,
Yeah.
our human, those that despise the body, that we
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to be liberated from
Yeah,
it, that
yeah.
we want to be somewhere else. I thought like, isn't there a need for that creation, for us to like, want to like, discover things that that we wouldn't discover
Yeah.
these spirits
Yeah.
if they weren't first made by man, if they weren't first like something that we had conjured.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So how does that? How do you how would you make it simple for us to understand, like when the Buddha is saying we should want to awaken all these different types of spirits, you know, like
Yeah.
recently we had a lot of consciousness about, or I had a lot of thinking about the hungry ghost,
Yeah, yeah,
things
yeah.
like that. It's like, how should we want to like engage with that spiritual aspect of the body, so to be
Yeah.
here and part of this herd and part of the mountain and part
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the world,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
also have this want for like a spirit.
Yeah. So there is a kind of fundamental division that is oftentimes made between the material body and the spiritual body. And fundamentally, in the Buddhist teachings, those two are not divided. But most of us have a very strong orientation in that division because we've grown up in a cultural situation in which that division is really emphasized. And you know, that runs through all kinds of questions of the day, technology and transhumanism, all these sorts of things. But we have that kind of fundamental split. It's very common in the way that our mind works. So I really agree with whoever that author was saying that oftentimes our move towards the spirit is a denial of the body. So the despisers of the body will then use the forces of kind of oppression to try to break the body or to ignore the body to release the spirit. And we see this in the case of the Buddha Shakyamuni's life, in his the portion of his life that was dedicated to asceticism. The idea that if you could sort of break the body, all kind of connection to the physical body, that the spirit would become free. And the Buddha abandoned that. He said that's not the way. That it is a kind of misunderstanding of the liberation, at least, that the Buddha was looking for and found. Now, having said that, within Buddhist teachings, there's lots of that, though, too. There's a lot of that thing you can read which just sounds like a totally despise the body for the purposes of being embraced by the spirit or embracing the spirit. So it takes a careful reading and always working within a tradition to try to not fall into that kind of lopsided view. So not saying you won't ever find that in any Buddhist teaching anywhere, just saying that it's wrong. I'm serious about that. But it's also funny to say. So I would say that one way that maybe you could think about this that would be interesting is in that wholeness of being, all of those herd animals, the mountain, the plains, the grain, the wolves that may be nipping at the heels of the herd animal, maybe that whole situation. We have another problem that arises when we try to just look at the whole and think that the whole is what's real, and anything that emerges is just it's not so important. It's just one of the pieces. So what happens is that how does the wholeness show up? Well, it shows up as you, it shows up as me, it shows up as every being. That's a kind of core Buddhist teaching. It also shows up as these forms that are not materially embodied, but are embodied in different layers of our being. They're not any better or any worse. But they are different aspects of being, which we can't just reduce to a kind of material body. So that's when we talk about spirits, we don't have to be talking about spirits as kind of the elevated place that if we could leave materiality, we would go there. We can talk about spirits as being just a fact of being, just like we're a fact of being, right? But are also all empty. So a lot of a modern teaching will take the teachings of emptiness in Buddhism and then try to apply it to a very material interpretation of reality and kind of material reductionist is the way I would describe it, way of thinking about reality. But that's okay, that's expedient means too. Like some easier maybe as some type of mind to get the Dharma that way, so the Buddha Dharma says, great, take it that way. All the Dharma is sort of wrong, right? And so it's sort of wrong because to match your mind, it has to be sort of wrong, right? So there's kind of an ease with that in Buddhism. That's a little bit different. But once we kind of we come to a dead end in that way of thinking, then what might open up? So an example would be the soul of the world. I think that's a spirit we all need to have. At least as a human race, if we don't key into a little bit more thoroughly, we're at the edge of breaking some things in kind of unrepairable ways. So, is that spirit of the world real? Yeah, 100%, 100% real as you or I. Not just made up, but also doesn't work by the same laws as the kind of what we think about how material things come together. So anyway, that's just some reflections on what you're saying. Yeah.
Gojo-san, for those of us for whom the Buddha might be kind of like a lofty concept and hard to engage with, can you talk a little bit about like working with one's real world teacher without being caught by their outward signs?
Yeah. So, it be a little bit of a circuitous route to get there, but I'm going to try it. I've had the honor to be a preceptor for maybe 100 people or so. And when a person receives a precepts, then part of the preceptor's responsibility is to choose a Dharma name for them. And I really, even now, sometimes I think, gosh, should we still keep using Dharma names at the temple or not? I know it's like, think about the first time you came here, you're like, oh, cult, people are using these weird names. So I think a lot about that. Like, it's like, we don't have to do that. It's sort of how we started here at Buddha Eye, and then we do it. I like it, basically I like it, but sometimes I worry, like, should we, is that helpful or not helpful for this kind of larger thing? Hard to remember people's names and blah, 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 blah. The reason I bring it up here is, why do I keep coming back to, we should use our Dharma names? And the reason is because the Dharma name is a vehicle for how we are seen as our aspiration for awakening. And so we do that all for each other when we use someone's Dharma name, or if we just meet someone and don't affix only to their marks, but also endeavor to see their non-marks, or to see past their marks. We can see someone in another way. So when a preceptor chooses a Dharma name, that's what they're doing. They're trying to see the marks and the non-marks. And for that to be an expression of the aspiration towards awakening. For a student, when we receive from our preceptor or from the ordination from a teacher, then as we receive it that way, we're seen that way, then we do the same thing back. And in that seeing, what we're looking is both at their form and their non-form. And in that, then we can find what it is, the seeing and being seen of Buddhahood. which is a great encouragement to us. And from the side of the preceptor is also a great encouragement to the preceptor. It's like that's the real. It's like this thing which you can't do any other way. There's a feeling like that. So I would say the first thing is orienting in that is really important, and we do it ritually through those ceremonies, but then coming back again and again to the discipline of returning to your teacher, your core teacher in some way, even if they're not close. Like my teacher's passed away now, but I still make prostrations to him every morning at the founder's altar here, for example. Prostrations is a really good way. Oftentimes in the Western Buddhism, we're a little bit shy about prostration. So like a lot of temples, here we don't have a problem with it. You do a lot of prostrations. Like for ceremonies like precept ceremonies or things like that, people are prostrating to the preceptor. And a lot of places in the West have done away with that. The teachers feel very uncomfortable with it, and so I had one of my colleagues who was asking for my advice about that. She was going to do ordination for someone. It was the first time she was ordaining someone, and she was asking me like, well, what do I need to do? And I said, because I know her, I was like, don't skip the prostrations. Because it's not just prostrations are a little, we have to get used to them, but it's like as the ordaining teacher there, she has to stand like this and receive the prostrations. It's agonizing, right? And I knew she wouldn't want to do it, and she we were talking on Zoom, and she kind of laughed at me. She said, I knew you were going to say that. But the reason I bring it up here is that that act of prostrating to our teacher, which the ancestors, when they write about this, they all recommend we should do it over and over and over again. That act of prostrating to our teacher, the literal act, and the heart that it engenders, is not just a surrender to perfection. It's not just a surrender to, I see that this person is perfect, therefore I'm willing to submit to them. It is that seeing of the truth of the aspiration of the teacher that can also see the truth of the aspiration of the student, which is what's real. And so the prostrations become a way of a kind of yoga of that exercise. Because the final thing I will say about that is that to really follow our teacher with our whole heart means that if we think they're doing something harmful, we have to say something. It's not like you have the option of saying something. It's like you have to say something. If we're going to keep the truth of that relationship, and that doesn't mean that we may stop prostrating to them. You see, that's the important part. It doesn't mean, I saw there's something wrong with you, so now I'm not going to prostrate to him, I'm going to say what's wrong. My saying something is wrong is my prostration. Yeah. Okay, last one, yes.
Can you speak a little bit more about the inward and the outward? Some similarities in your talk today, and then also in the practices that you've been sharing in the Zazen class. It seems there's some distinction, and I'm wondering about using more about that.
Yeah. So in this tradition, if there's inward, there has to be outward. There's always everything shows up that way. You don't get just one side. They rely on each other. They're provisional, we could say. But if we, as a being with consciousness, we will then have, as a conditioned being with consciousness, we will have that internal and external. I would say, just as a side note, even all the things that we consider as not having consciousness also have an inward and outward. But we can leave that aside, just in case people's mind got fixed on the consciousness part in some way. But we could say, I look out into the world and I see things or experience things. And I could look inwardly and I could see and experience things. What happens, like is always happening in those kind of dichotomies, is we tend to split the two apart, and we think we lose a connection between the two. So we think that outward phenomena are real, and the inward phenomena are just my reactions to the outward phenomena. Or I think my inward life is real, and the outward is just an expression of whatever my inward life is. And we kind of bounce between the two in some way. Whether we're philosophically thinking about it or not, just in our attitude about stuff, we tend to bounce back and forth. And it's this kind of split between the two, it becomes a kind of protective mechanism. If I could just locate what is true or important in an outside sort of sense, I think it will take care of my internal struggle, my responsibility to actually find out what's important. If I could just locate outside the importance, then I don't have to really deal with that anymore. And then the opposite is also true. When there's outward difficulty in some way, or something we don't really know what to do with or work with, then we can think like, well, if I could just straighten out my feeling or thinking about it, then it would be okay. I just have to work on it myself. So Buddha's teaching is one of the fundamental things is trying to teach us to release the divide, not to release that there is an outer and an inner, but to release the way in which we hold them in opposition to each other because of karmic qualities in our being and circumstance. So we have that kind of division built into a life of samsara or a life that's centered in ignorance, would be the way Buddhism would say it. So in meditation, that's one of the reasons, for those who've been part of the Zazen class that was happening this fall, we just finished on Thursday, I was teaching some about an outward moving way of settling the mind and an inward way of settling the mind. It's not, that's just a kind of exercise to teach us about that posture that we're tending to either go one direction or the other. And so it's a way to teach us that actually those two are the same movement. They're not really a different movement. So if we hear a sound, for example, we had the biker gang Crow group here a second ago come through, you hear the sound. So there's a way in which that sound can be both outwardly released and allowed, and inwardly received and felt down to returning to something beyond myself. That those two things can happen together, and that there's a living body of being which emerges in that kind of hearing, or that kind of seeing, or that kind of smelling, etc. And that's where the focus on, if we ever talk about an outward or an inward, it's for the purposes of waking up that wholeness of the body that we're trying to do there. So in this case, seeing the Buddha that's why it becomes such a big, interesting question. What does it mean to see anything? I mean, of course there's the level of there's some materiality with light that bounces off it that goes into our eyes and then is interpreted in our consciousness in some way. But what does that even mean for us to interpret that? To have the production of an experience of sight? It's completely baffling, really. And yet, all manner of beings appear to us, moment after moment. So we're using that as a doorway to release the grasp that we have on objectifying everything, because the seeing itself is just sort of impossible, and yet we're doing it. So I don't know if I just backed into a corner somewhere. That's what I'm thinking about. That's what I'm thinking about with it. So there's I guess I would say there's a very, especially for people who are meditating a lot, there's a way in which there's a certain avenue of the posture of your mind in meditation, which you will learn through that. But if you're that type of person, really encourage you to make sure that you're popping, that you're also like doing it you know, like in the things of life, you know. Probably should finish up.
I have an announcement. Those of you who are on our postal mailing list hopefully received a copy of this earlier this week. We're at a time in the year where we launch our year-end appeal, and it's something that we do every year to raise the funds that we need to make everything we offer here, everything you experience here, possible. Our budget for this year was $192,000. The year-end appeal, which is this year, is $70,000. That's our goal. Will help us raise the full $192,000, which puts us on good footing for next year. So generosity, it's the heart of our practice in many, many ways, not only financial, but also in helping people and teachings. It's life, everything gives. And this time of year, we're asking all of us to be as generous as possible so we can meet or exceed the $70,000 goal. And part of what this $192,000 budget does is it gives us a full-time teacher. Not every Sangha, every temple, has the honor or the privilege of having a full-time teacher who's here to talk to us on Sundays, to meet with, to train other teachers that are all available to meet. And for him to be able to do that, he needs a salary that allows him to live. So that's part of the $192,000. So I just close again, asking each of us to be as generous as we can with our financial resources. There's many ways to give. If anybody has any questions, please reach out to me.
I have an announcement also. We are gathering donations for our year-end holiday craft sale, which will be held on Sunday, the 21st, and after service, and then again on Sunday, the 28th, after service. So I believe there's a table out front where you can donate items. They can be handmade items that you've made. They can be items that are in, I don't know what the word is I want, kind of good condition, not yard sale items, but you might have some jewelry that you no longer wear, or some kind of artistic items you no longer want or need or use, so you can donate those as well. If you have any questions, you can see me or Myowan, who's not here today. Myowan is also coordinating a volunteer schedule to staff that event, so check in with one of us. Thank you.
I'd like to add a little bit to what I just said. I forgot, I think most people know this, that we don't charge for anything here. A lot of Zen communities charge for retreats. There's different levels of membership. We don't have that. We rely on this radical practice of generosity, of relying on the community to make everything that's here possible. So I just would like to add that.
From December 17th to December 14th.
7th.
From December 7th to December 14th.
We're going back in time.
The temple will be hosting our annual Rohatsu Seshin. That's a meditation intensive retreat. If you'd like to register, there are forms available in the front room. If you have any questions about that, you can speak to Kogen, who is the retreat leader, or to me, or to other teachers. Thank you.
When are you asking people to register by?
By the 3 days, the Wednesday before that Sunday, so it's December 3rd, ish, December 4th. Yeah.
And earlier the better.
You said the 17th to the 14th.
You were taking it backwards.
Taking it backwards.